The mailbox used to mean something. It wasn't just a metal box nailed to a post. It wasn't a place where junk collected. It was quite literally a lifeline, a tether between your world and the world beyond your front yard. You didn't check it on the way back from errands. You didn't glance at it absent-mindedly between scrolling and sipping coffee. No, you walked to it, intentionally, expectantly, as if something inside might just change your whole day. And sometimes it did, because that little box didn't just carry bills, it carried news, real handwritten human news. It carried birthday cards from cousins 2 states away, postcards from beach towns you'd never seen. It carried Sears catalogs so thick they could knock a child unconscious if dropped from shoulder height. And it carried letters, long ones, folded ones, typed ones, perfumed ones. Letters from grandparents, pen pals, old friends, people who wrote like they had something to say, and you read them like they were gold. You remember how it felt, don't you? That soft clunk of the mailbox lid, the creak of the hinges, that dry rustle as you reached in and your fingers touched paper. Sometimes it was thin, a single envelope, but sometimes there was a stack, and your heart would skip just a little, because maybe, just maybe, someone thought of you today. You didn't wait until you got back inside. You flipped through them right there at the edge of the driveway, eyes scanning return addresses, hunting for familiar handwriting. You could spot your aunt's cursive from 30 feet away. You knew your dad's VA correspondence by the size of the envelope. You learned to read postage stamps like they were flags indicating where a piece of someone's life had traveled from to land in your hands. And every so often, there was a letter for you, not addressed to resident, not addressed to Mr. and Mrs., but with your name, spelled right, centered, like a little paper whisper saying, "Hey, you matter." It could have been from a friend who moved away, a relative you only saw on Christmas, a summer camp buddy, or if you were lucky, someone you loved, someone who folded a page with care, wrote your name with meaning, maybe even added a doodle in the corner. And the moment you saw that envelope, everything else fell away. You didn't think about chores, or dinner, or homework. You thought about what was inside, what someone had taken time to write by hand just for you. And that anticipation, it wasn't just part of the experience, it was the experience. You didn't get instant gratification. There was no reply button, no delivered notification. You wrote, you waited, and that wait made everything sweeter. You checked the mailbox daily, even if you weren't expecting anything, especially if you weren't, because the mailbox had mystery, magic, a kind of analog suspense, and every member of the family treated it like it was theirs. Your dad had his routine. Pick up the paper, open the box, tap the mail twice against his hand, like he was shuffling a deck. Your mom would take it out gently, flip through it by the sink while the kettle boiled. You checked it like a gambler, hoping for that one envelope that wasn't boring, that wasn't grown up, that was for you. And even when it wasn't, you still looked, because that was part of the rhythm of the day. Before notifications, there was the postman. You knew his name, you waved. You timed your afternoon to the sound of the mailbox clinking shut. Sometimes he'd chat. Sometimes he'd ask about your dog, your mom, your summer plans. And sometimes, if you were lucky, He'd hand you the mail directly, like a gift. He wore that leather satchel like it held stories, and it did. Because the mailbox wasn't just a place for delivery, it was a portal to memories, to surprises, to moments that mattered, and you checked it every day, religiously, hopefully. With a sense of wonder we seem to have lost in a world where everything arrives before we even finish asking. But back then, you waited, you checked, you hoped, and somehow, that made it all feel more real. He wasn't just the mailman. He was part of the neighborhood, part of the routine, part of the backdrop of daily life that somehow you always noticed. Even if you didn't speak to him every day, you knew his rhythm. You knew the sound of his steps, the way his bag thumped gently against his hip, the squeak of his mail cart, wheels on the pavement, the little slam of the mailbox lid when he was done. And more than anything, you trusted him. You trusted that when he came, he brought something real, something that mattered. He wasn't delivering junk, he was delivering connection. And sometimes, he was the connection. He waved to you from the sidewalk. He called you by name. He handed the mail directly to your mom if she was outside with laundry or watering the ferns. He remembered if someone had been sick. He asked about your dog. He knew which mailbox stuck, and which one creaked, and which one needed an extra push to close all the way. He knew the stories behind the doors he delivered to. He saw the bills pile up when times were hard. He noticed the sympathy cards after a funeral. He smiled when the birthday envelopes started coming in thick with confetti and handwriting that looked like cake tasted. And he never said much, but he knew. He knew when someone had moved away, even before the moving van came. He knew who always got postcards from Florida and who hadn't gotten a letter in weeks. He knew which kids waited by the window for mail from a parent stationed overseas. And when the mail was late, or the weather was rough, he still came. Rain, snow, scorching sun, he came. Not because it was his job, but because he took pride in it. Because being the mailman meant something. It meant being part of people's lives, even if only for a few steps up the driveway. It meant delivering more than envelopes. It meant showing up every day without asking for thanks, and still earning it. And when he wasn't there, you noticed. You asked, is he sick? Is he on vacation? Do you think he's okay? Because for all the quietness of his role, his absence rang louder than you expected. Some of them became legends in the neighborhood. The mailman who always had a peppermint in his pocket. The one who sang old country tunes softly as he walked. The one who brought your family a card on Christmas, signed in his careful block letters. Thanks for the cold tea last summer. Happy holidays, Pete. They were more than uniformed figures. They were keepers of the small sacred parts of daily life. They saw your world from the outside and still cared deeply about what was inside. And when you were a kid, you admired them. Their leather satchels, their crisp hats, their endless knowledge of addresses and routes and whose dog to avoid. You'd walk a few steps behind them, pretending to deliver imaginary mail of your own. You'd ask how much stamps cost now. You'd ask if they'd ever found a letter from a secret admirer, and sometimes if they weren't in too much of a rush, they'd play along. Yep, they'd say with a wink, just delivered one this morning, and you'd grin and run back inside and check your mailbox. just in case. Because to a child, the mailman was a little bit like Santa. Reliable, quiet, always delivering something you hoped for. And even as you grew older, that feeling stayed. Not magical, but solid, reassuring. Like the world still worked the way it was supposed to. Like someone still knew where you lived and came there on purpose every single day. And now packages come with no face attached. You get a text saying, "Delivered," and step outside to a cardboard box. No wave, no conversation, no peppermint in the pocket. Just a drop, a click, and they're gone. And sure, the mail still comes. But the mailman, the person, they're fading. But you remember. You remember the one who smiled when you got your college acceptance letter. The one who knocked on your door when a letter was too big for the box. The one who patted your shoulder when the stack of sympathy cards arrived. And maybe you still think of them from time to time when you check your mailbox and hear the quiet echo of something that used to mean so much more. We didn't expect things instantly. That wasn't the deal. You sent a letter, and then you waited. Not for hours, not even for a day or two, sometimes a week, sometimes more, depending on where it was going. Florida, Ohio, somewhere out west, you could count on at least 5 to 7 days before it arrived, and another 5 to 7 before anything came back. And you were okay with that. More than okay. It made everything sweeter. Because when the letter finally arrived, when you saw that envelope with the familiar scrawl and the postmark that confirmed it had traveled miles just to find you, you felt it. You felt the space between the words, the time it had taken, the care, the intention. You weren't getting a reaction, you were getting a response. And that's a big difference. These days we expect things now. The minute we send a message, we look for the little bubbles to show they're typing. We refresh. We check again. If someone takes an hour to reply, we wonder if they're upset. We think something's wrong. But back then, time was part of the message. It was baked in. And it taught you patience. It taught you to savor communication, not just consume it. To hold on to a letter. To reread it, to find something new in the second paragraph that you missed the first time. You didn't skim, you soaked it in, and in that waiting, you dreamed. You imagined what the reply would say. You thought about the person on the other end, how they'd read your letter, maybe smile, maybe laugh, maybe pause, and feel something they hadn't felt in a while. That anticipation wasn't frustrating. It was part of the joy. You planned your reply with care. Not just the words, but the paper, the pen. Would you include a photo, a doodle? Did you have time to stop by the store for a better envelope, and then you sent it off and let it go? No read receipts, no delivery status, just trust. And when a response came, it wasn't short. It wasn't 5 words. It was a letter, a full page, maybe 2, maybe 3. Someone had sat down and made space for you in their day. And that space, you could feel it. It told you, you matter enough for this. Enough to pause. Enough to think. Enough to write, not in a rush, not between appointments, not while distracted, but fully. And you gave that back. You didn't just scribble a reply. You considered it. You added things you forgot to say last time. You shared something new. You built a conversation slowly with care. And when you dropped it in the mailbox, you didn't feel anxious. You felt proud. You knew they'd read it in a few days. You knew they'd smile. You knew the conversation continued, even when you couldn't hear it. Because back then, news took its time. And that made it feel real. Even big news births, engagements, deaths was delivered by mail. And yes, sometimes you found out later than you wanted to. Sometimes the moment had passed, but the meaning never had. Because that card, announcing the new baby, that condolence letter, that wedding invitation, you held it. You displayed it. You returned to it. It didn't disappear into a screen. It became part of your home. And now news travels fast. Faster than we can think. Faster than we can feel. Sometimes we find out someone passed away through a Facebook post, and we don't even have time to process before the algorithm moves on to a dog dancing to Taylor Swift. We've gained speed, but we've lost weight. We've lost the slowness that made things settle, that gave you time to sit with joy, or sadness, or wonder, that allowed you to miss someone without immediately filling the silence. But you remember. You remember walking back from the mailbox with a letter in hand and a head full of thoughts. You remember sitting on the porch, legs swinging, rereading the same lines until they sank in. You remember writing your reply in pencil first, just to get it right before putting it in ink. And in those moments, those slow, deliberate, loving moments, you felt something we don't often feel now. Presence, not just theirs, your own. You were in the act of connecting, fully, honestly, without distractions. And that's why it was sweeter, because you waited, and when it came, you were ready to receive it. And it wasn't just the joy of receiving it, was the quiet satisfaction of waiting well, of writing with no guarantee, of hoping without pressure, of trusting that someone somewhere was doing the same. They were reading your letter by a lamp, smiling, folding it carefully, thinking about how to reply, and you didn't need to ping them, didn't need to follow up, didn't need to remind them, because when someone took time, you felt it in the writing. They'd mention things you said 2 letters ago. They'd ask about the neighbor's new baby or how your mom was doing after her cold. They remembered, because their world had made room for yours. And the thing is, those letters never really disappeared. Even after the reply came, you kept the old one, tucked it into a drawer, pressed flat under a book, slipped between pages of a photo album. You'd find it years later, yellowed, still folded the same way. And suddenly you were back in that moment, reading it the first time on the porch, sunlight dancing on your knees. You could hear their voice again, feel the waiting again, and smile, because some things, some connections, are sweeter not in spite of the wait, but because of it. Times you wrote back the same day. You read the letter, set it down, and didn't even take your shoes off before grabbing a pen. The words flowed like a conversation that had been paused mid-sentence, like they had already been sitting in your chest, waiting for the envelope to arrive so they could come out. The reply wasn't work. It was release. You couldn't wait to put it back in the mailbox, couldn't wait to keep the momentum going, like tossing a ball gently across the miles. And then other times, you let it sit. Not because you didn't care, not because you forgot, but because the letter asked something more of you. Maybe the words were heavier. Maybe they stirred something inside that needed time to rise. Or maybe you just wanted to live with them a little longer before sending something back. So you placed the letter by your bed, or on the kitchen counter, or inside a book with a bookmark to remind you. You reread it once, then again. You underlined something. You stared at the corner of the page where they doodled a coffee mug and wondered what kind of day they were having when they wrote it. And you let it be. There was a rhythm to that, a sacred kind of pause, one that didn't mean delay, but depth. You weren't ignoring the letter. You were listening to it, letting it work on you, letting it echo through your days until you were ready to answer, not reactively, but honestly. Sometimes you even started writing, then stopped, crumpled the page, started again, because it mattered. And sometimes the best replies took time, not just to be written, but to be felt. You'd think about them while folding laundry, while washing dishes, while walking the dog at dusk. You'd remember a line they wrote and find yourself smiling while doing something else. And then one evening, without warning, it would happen. You'd pull out the paper, the envelope, and the words would arrive like an old friend at your door, soft, sure, and finally ready. Because a good letter isn't rushed. It arrives when it should, and people understood that. There was grace in the wait. No one sent a follow-up if you didn't reply in 2 days. No one took offense if it was a whack or more. Because they trusted you, and more than that, they trusted the connection. It was like tending a garden. Not every seed blooms right away. Not every message needs a reply that same hour. But if you're patient, something grows. And when you wrote back, whether quickly or slowly, it was yours. Your hand, your pen, your voice not filtered or auto-corrected or softened by emojis. Sometimes you apologized for the delay. Sometimes you didn't. Sometimes the reply was short. I've been tired lately, but I wanted you to know I got your letter, and that was enough. Because replies weren't measured in length. They were measured in sincerity. And the truth is, you remembered the letters you waited for the most. The ones that arrived weeks after you had almost stopped checking the mailbox. The ones that said, "Sorry it took me a while, but I've been thinking about you." Those replies felt like rain after a dry season, like someone had made space in their life for you again. And now if someone doesn't answer in a few hours, we assume the worst. We reread our own message and wonder if we said too much. We check their status, their last online timestamp, their profile picture. We fill the silence with anxiety. But letters didn't give you that option. They made you wait, and trust, and hope, and somehow that made the connection stronger. Because if someone was still thinking of you after all that time, if they still cared enough to write even late, you knew it was real. And sometimes letting it sit wasn't just about thoughtfulness. Sometimes life got in the way. Sick kids, extra shifts, family emergencies, exhaustion, or just the need for quiet. And when a reply finally came, no one asked for an explanation. They just smiled, read it slowly, and replied in their own time. You see, not every silence was a void. Sometimes it was sacred, a pause between notes that made the music richer. You knew how to wait, and you knew how to write when the words were ready. Not to impress, not to hurry, but to connect. And that's what made it all worth it. Some letters you kept because you had to. You read them once and something inside you said, "Don't throw this away." Maybe it was the way the words were strung together. Maybe it was the handwriting or the paper or the little note at the bottom that simply said, "Thinking of you." Whatever it was, you folded it carefully. You didn't even have to think about it. You just knew. And so it began. A collection. Not something you planned, but something that grew quietly in a drawer, in a shoebox, in an old cookie tin, tucked between books, pressed flat between photo albums, slipped behind postcards on the fridge. They were everywhere, and somehow always where you netted them to be. Some were tied with string, some had coffee stains, some were opened and reopened so many times the folds had turned soft like cloth. Some had tears on them, yours or theirs, and all of them held something the phone never could proof. Proof that someone cared enough to sit still, to write, to send, to wait. Proof that they loved you whether they said it outright or just wrapped it in a story. And they stayed with you. You moved houses, and still that box came along. You packed it, last opened it first. Even when you didn't read them, you knew they were there. They were a kind of security blanket for the soul. A gentle reminder that you mattered to someone once, maybe still, and that mattered too. You didn't save all the letters, just the good ones. The ones where they said something real. The ones where they shared a memory only you two held. The ones that made you laugh out loud. The ones that arrived when you needed them most. Some came from people who were still in your life. Some from those who had faded away. And some from people who were long gone, but whose words remained. Their handwriting became like a voice from another room. A voice you hadn't heard in years. But it was still there, on paper, alive in ink. Sometimes you pulled one out on a rainy day, sometimes on a birthday, sometimes when sleep wouldn't come and the house was too quiet. And suddenly you weren't alone. You were sitting with your younger self, reading a note from someone who knew you then, or your older self being reminded of something you'd forgotten. Or your present self just needing to feel connected again. Those letters, they weren't just communication. They were time machines, tiny paper anchors to parts of your life that had drifted off. And sometimes you'd read one and feel a lump in your throat because you remembered the exact day it arrived, what the sky looked like, what you were going through, how that envelope, that ink, those words, saved you. No text has ever done that. No email, no comment under a photo, because those fade. But paper stays. You don't print out a sweet text and tuck it in a drawer. You don't frame an emoji, but you will fold a letter, slide it into a book, keep it like a secret, like something holy. And maybe that's what made it different. It wasn't instant. It wasn't constant. It cost something, time, thought, effort, a stamp. But in return, it gave you a piece of someone's heart. A piece you could return to. Years later, when you found that old box during spring cleaning, you sat down on the floor cross-legged and opened it like a treasure chest. And it was treasure, because inside were voices you hadn't heard in decades, moments captured not in photos but in phrases, jokes that still landed, love that still lingered, and you cried, or laughed, or both, because the people in those letters, they were still with you, in ink, in memory, in the quiet presence of something worth keeping. So yes, you saved them. You saved the good ones. And if you're lucky, if the world's been kind, someone out there has saved yours too. Tea wasn't just mail. It was a calendar you could hold. The mailbox didn't just deliver letters. It delivered time. Seasons arrived inside that little metal box. You could tell what month it was by what showed up inside. Holiday cards, birthday invites, wedding announcements, tax forms, church newsletters with paper snowflakes or tiny pumpkins drawn in the corners. The world didn't just change on the calendar, it changed in the mail. You knew spring had come when the catalogs turned pastel. You knew summer was close when postcards started arriving. Sunset beaches, mountains, cartoon alligators in sunglasses. Autumn brought thicker envelopes, school newsletters, Thanksgiving menus from the church supper. And winter meant Christmas cards, stacks of them, and oh, the Christmas cards. Some were store-bought with glitter that got everywhere. Some were homemade, folded by little hands in Sunday school. Some had photos, families standing stiff in front of trees, everyone in matching sweaters and polite smiles. Some just had a handwritten note, thinking of you this season. But every single one was a heartbeat, a sign that someone still remembered, still cared, still made the time. You pinned them to corkboards, taped them to the fridge, made a display on the mantel, and even when the tree came down, you kept them just a little longer. The mailbox was how you measured life happening. Graduation announcements in May. Baby showers in June. Save the dates in September. Sympathy cards in February. You tracked your own life by what you received and what you sent. There was something ceremonial about sending a card. You didn't just pick the first one. You read through them at the store. You thought, would this make her laugh? Would this remind him of that time at the lake? Then you chose your pen carefully. You didn't write dear, unless you meant it. You didn't sign your name without a little doodle or underline, because it was more than a note. It was a moment, and when you opened the mailbox and found something waiting, you felt it. Not just the message, the meaning. Someone thought of you, on your birthday, on their trip, after you lost someone. They took time, real time, to acknowledge a milestone, to be part of it, even if only through paper and ink. And somehow that made the moment feel more true. It wasn't just another day. It was your day, because the mailbox told you so. Even the timing became part of the message. That birthday card that arrived right on time, perfect. The one that came a week late, even sweeter because they remembered anyway. And the ones that arrived early with a little note. I know I'll forget later, so I'm saying it now. Those were the ones that made you smile the most. You saved them. You remembered who sent them. And you tried to do the same, because sending something was a kind of promise. Not just, I love you, but I'll show up for your moments, even from far away, even when life is busy, even if I don't have the right words, I'll send something. And the mailbox was how you kept those promises. It's how you knew your niece made honor roll, how you found out your old friend was getting remarried, how you learned about Uncle Bill's bypass and Cousin Rachel's new job, and that the Johnsons down the street had finally sold their house, all through the box, that same little door you opened every day. And sure, you can get all of that through social media now. Photos, updates, likes, comments, but it's different. A Facebook post is for everyone. A letter is for you. It doesn't care about engagement. It isn't chasing likes. It's a quiet, honest gesture that says, here, I wanted you to know this. And maybe that's why the mailbox mattered so much. Because it didn't just mark time, it honored it. Not with confetti or countdowns, but with real connection. With a card that took days to arrive. With a note that didn't vanish into a feed. With something you could hold display and keep. Even now, decades later, you can remember the way those cards looked. The handwriting, the stamps, the feel of the envelope, and the warmth that settled in your chest when you realized they remembered. Because some moments are too big to text, too beautiful to scroll past, too important not to send. And the mailbox knew that. And so did we. These days, the mailbox is quieter. You still check it, but more out of habit than hope. Most of what's inside now comes from companies, not people. Flyers you didn't ask for. Credit card offers with your name printed by a machine. The occasional bill, though, most of those have gone digital, too. It's thinner, lighter, emptier, and yet you still check. Because part of you remembers what it used to mean. You open the little door and look inside, and for a split second, your heart still wanders. Just a flicker, just a whisper. Is there something here for me? Most days the answer is no, but sometimes it's yes. Sometimes there's still a birthday card with actual handwriting. Sometimes there's a thank you note, carefully folded with the stamp slightly off-center. Sometimes your granddaughter sends a crayon drawing with her name in big letters and the S written backward. And when those come, everything else melts away. You sit down. You run your fingers over the paper. You read it slowly, even if it's short. And for a moment, you're not just someone checking the mail. You're someone receiving something real. You're someone who matters. Again. Because even now, even in this world of instant everything, a letter still carries weight. It doesn't vibrate. It doesn't light up your screen. It doesn't disappear if you don't swipe in time. It waits for you. It sits in the box, folded and quiet, until you're ready to receive it. And when you do, it says something digital. Never can I showed up. For you. That's the heartbeat. That's what's still alive, even as the box grows lonelier. And maybe that's why you still buy stamps, even though they keep getting more expensive. Maybe that's why you keep a little stack of blank cards in the kitchen drawer. Maybe that's why you still have your address book. Yes, the paper one. And flip through it, sometimes just to make sure the names haven't faded. Because part of you knows the mailbox isn't just a box. It's a space for connection. And it's still there. Waiting. Waiting for us to remember that connection doesn't always need to be fast. That some messages are worth more because they take longer. That sometimes showing up late with a handwritten card means more than replying instantly with a thumbs-up emoji. You still check it. You still hope. And once in a while, when something good arrives, you smile. You smile because the box still works. The world may have changed, but the mailbox hasn't forgotten how to carry love. So tonight, as you turn off the lights and the house settles around you, maybe take a quiet moment to remember a letter you once received. One that came at just the right time. One that smelled like old paper and warm days. One that made you feel seen, even if it only said 3 words. Picture the mailbox, not the metal, not the shape, but what it meant. That walk down the driveway, that little tug of hope in your chest, that soft clatter of the lid opening, and that feeling that maybe someone remembered you. Because they did. and maybe tomorrow the box will be empty. But tonight in the stillness you carry all those old words inside you, all the love that came in envelopes, all the kindness sealed in stamps, all the proof that even silence can hum with meaning. Let that comfort you now. Let it settle across your shoulders like a soft old quilt. Let it lull your thoughts, slow your breathing, and hold you gently. You are not forgotten. Sleep well,